Actually, I love Mr. Robot, as you may know. I love Mr. Robot because at least in Mr. Robot, he's actually using real techniques. Okay? A lot of movies, you know, there's like the spinning geometric shapes on the screen, and he breaks the password in 30 seconds or whatever. In Mr. Robot, he actually is using real-world tools and techniques. But the time frame is what's unreal in Mr. Robot because, like you say, nobody wants to watch a brute force attack that takes 5 weeks. Nobody's going to stick around. Nobody's going to stick around for that, right?
It's not going to be a very good movie for sure, or YouTube video. Yeah.
I think we should move that way.
In this video, I'm going to show you how to crack a Wi-Fi password. It told me that it was going to take like to the next bang.
One eternity later.
More than 10 years to crack it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Please like the video and click on the bell to get notifications. What's the quickest you've done a hack and what's the longest you've done for a hack? Can you give us sort of like the extremes?
Well, I mean, have been these cases that always come. First of all, things have gotten more secure in my career. Okay, so there was a time, you know, not too long ago where you could get into a lot of systems in a matter of minutes because people just weren't very concerned about security. Now, as you come up against more secure systems, and it depends upon the value of the system. You know, if it's trying to get your neighbor's Wi-Fi password, you're probably not going to commit days or weeks to it. If you're talking about the Russian nuclear facility, then you might commit years to that.
And millions of dollars, yeah.
And millions of dollars. That's going to be a difference in how much resources and time you're going to commit to. Recently, I taught
Bro, what the fuck? Why you close the door?
And
Come on.
SCADA hacking class, we actually use real-world targets. Say that, but we didn't.
We'll not show that on YouTube, but it's fine if you do that in classes. That's another reason. YouTube. If it's in your class, then you can show real world stuff.
We don't do anything malicious, okay, in these classes. What we do is we try to demonstrate how insecure these SCADA systems are. And so, yeah, we're like, will this work? Will this work? Will this work? And in some cases, kind of randomly choose SCADA systems around the world, and we try different techniques to hack them. Every class I've ever taught, we were able to get into some of these systems in a matter of minutes. This is the present. These are random systems. Right? This isn't an educational lab system. These are real-world systems. We can get into them in a matter of minutes, or we can pull their memory out of them. And of course, we know after this last vulnerability report that came out that these memory areas contain passwords. So if we know where to look in memory, we can pull the memory and get the password on the system. In any case, so some of them, it's a matter of just a couple of minutes. And in some cases, it's weeks and months. You know, and that's what the Russians are really good at, is that they don't give up. You know, they are persistent. They will be back tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, until they find a way.
Let's use this real-world example. How many cameras approximately did you guys get access to in Ukraine? How long did it take?
I'm not going to give you the exact figure. I will put it in the hundreds. Okay. All right. We'll say that. Actually, we got most of them done with 15 people. We got most of them done in about a week.
I mean, that's quite worrying because, I mean, it's like a dedicated team of 15 people. It's amazing what you can accomplish in a week.
And they're not all expert hackers. Some of them were kind of lower level, and we gave them, you know, easier tasks, and some of them were pretty sophisticated. But with everybody working together, we were able to, you know, get into hundreds. Let's put it that way.
What worries me is the SCADA system, that you can just randomly choose stuff on the internet to get access to these systems, which, I mean, like we spoke about a few times, it's real-world damage. It's not just a credit card that you're stealing from an individual, which is bad, but I mean, you could affect hundreds or thousands of lives.
Yes. Yeah, in this case, these are cameras, and cameras generally are not that well protected. In general, people don't protect them. I wouldn't compare it to a highly secure environment because people put up cameras, and oftentimes they're put up there, like in some of these cameras, they appear to be, we don't know who owns them, but they appear to be security cameras,
99 here.
put up in a parking lot or on the street. And people, they're not concerned about revealing confidential information because
I
it's just
think we
for
should move
internal
that way.
use to be able to view what's going on outside on the street or in an office, in a grocery store. Or, I was showing one the other day where we're
There's a
actually
jump
inside
pad
this
right here that
grocery
might be
store, which
fun.
is, it's kind of enlightening because we see all the horrible pictures from Ukraine of the devastation. But in reality, most of the country, life goes on as normal. People are going to the grocery store and buying bread and buying bananas, and that's what most of the country
Friends, I'm
looks
going
like.
to loot
So we
here.
forget that most of the people who are in Ukraine right now are just trying to live a normal life, going to school, going to work, catching the bus, and that's what some of our cameras are capturing. Because most of the population of Ukraine, they're not fighting the war. The war is mostly in the east and the south. And much of the population is in Kyiv and Lviv and other places. And so we have cameras in those places, and people are just going about their everyday life. They're going to school, they're going to work, they're catching the bus, they're going to the grocery store. A very normal life with rockets going over their heads.
It's unreal. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, one of the questions that came up in the interview station is that they asked, we've been working on hacking in Ukraine last week or so. We got a request from Ukraine here's a list of IP cameras that we'd like access to. We want to be able to watch the Russians so that if they commit additional atrocities, we can keep an eye on them. And so the reporter asked me, he says, well, do you have cameras in the areas where the Russians are right now in the east? And I said, well, you need two things to access the camera. You need internet access and you need electricity. There is neither one of those in those areas right now. We can't access the cameras in Donbass, in Mariupol, what have you, because they've knocked out all the internet access, and there's not even electricity in Mariupol right now. We've got much of the rest of the country covered right now. We've got access to street cameras, office cameras. The idea here is to, one, if there are additional atrocities that are committed, that we can capture that and capture the people's faces who commit them. And two, we'd like the Russians to know that we have these cameras. And hopefully that deters their bad behavior. Human beings, when they think nobody's watching, can do some horrible things. But if they think there's even a chance that somebody is watching them, they will tend to act better, act more responsibly, act more humanely. The people in Bucha, they thought they could do that and never get caught and nobody was watching. If they thought that there was cameras watching them, it's likely that they would not have committed those atrocities. We're telling Russia now, look, we've got cameras throughout Ukraine. You do that again, we got your face. And your face is going to be taken to the ICC. Some people have come to me and said, well, the ICC is powerless against Russia because Russia's never going to give up their people to the ICC. And I would agree with that. The Russians are never going to give up their people to the ICC. So talking about prosecuting Russians for war crimes in the ICC is probably an exercise in frustration. But at the same time, I think that if the Russian soldiers know that we can see their faces when they're doing these things, hopefully that has an effect of deterring or limiting their behavior to act more humanely, even if it doesn't go to the ICC. Nobody wants to be seen in their worst moments, right? And Russian soldiers, we will capture you, we will capture images of you the next time that you do the things that you did in Bucha.
Let's get technical for a moment. How do you find online systems? I know you've got some articles again on your website, but let's talk it through for people who haven't read those articles. How do you find the systems?
Well, there's a number of OSN techniques to find the camera. I mean, the easiest one is to use Shodan. Shodan, by the way, all it does is that it pulls the banner off every IP address and port in the world. And that banner often includes technical details of what's behind it. If you know, say for instance, use SCADA systems, Schneider Electric or Siemens or any of the others, they pull the banner off systems, it will tell you this is a Schneider Electric system, right? And so what Shodan does is take all that information and puts it into a huge database and indexes it so you can search for those banners. So if you know the name of a camera or know what's in the banner, you can basically search Shodan for those keywords in the banner. Now, it may not be the name of the camera. It may be, you know, something else that's in the banner. So if you pull the banner, so for instance, you have one IP camera, and you pick the brand, pull the banner on it, then you can use that information to search for all the cameras in the world, okay, of that manufacturer.
It's like a fingerprint of the camera, yeah.
It's a fingerprint of the camera,
Yeah.
exactly. In some cases, in many cases, it's actually the manufacturer puts their name in their fingerprint. But in some cases, it's not. You just got to know what that fingerprint is. If you know that fingerprint, then Shodan will show you what all of them are on the world. There's also tools like Census and some others that also scan the world and put it all into a database that you can search for that key information. So you can identify the cameras that way. And then in some cases, the cameras aren't even.
What about bosses in their cameras? Because I know the answer. I feel like you tell everyone, because a lot of people, like you said,
I understand.
in people put parties on cameras.
Some cameras are installed and people don't put passwords on. And that's oftentimes they're like security cameras or they're street cameras, what have you, and they won't put passwords on it. So those are easily accessed through, say, something like Shodan. The second opportunity for you is that very often they're installed with default passwords. So you go to the manufacturer's website and find out what the default password is and try those out. And quite frankly, we found an awful lot of these cameras that we have in Ukraine, we found an awful lot of default passwords. And what they've done on these is that they put in other usernames and passwords, but they left the default. So there'll be like three or four users in there.
I know you said you don't like to say humans are the weakest link or the biggest problem, but it's often either because they don't have technical knowledge or they don't know how to secure systems or whatever, or just mistakes. That this kind of stuff happens.
I'm gonna die first.
We've all probably worked in an environment where we've got 1,000 things to do. You do, I do. Every day I've got 1,000 things to do. Right? I can't always give all of my attention to all of those things. Right? Sometimes I have to cut some corners someplace. And you can imagine where you have somebody who's setting up IP cameras who that's not their real job. They've been told, go set up the IP cameras. We need those, on the building over there. And they go up there and they set it up and they go back to their desk and it works. And okay, and nobody said, well, you gotta make it secure. I published the list of passwords. One guy wrote and said, nobody would ever leave the default passwords in place on a SCADA system. And I said, go look around. I've been in many systems around the world default passwords.
On the videos that I do on YouTube, so many people say, this is dumb because no one's going to do this. No one's going to use a basic password. But, what you're telling me is it happens all the time.
On big industrial systems where there's billions of dollars at stake. Somebody's left in the default passwords.
What happens if they don't? Because, on your website, you were talking about how to crack passwords. So let's say they do change the passwords. How do you get around that?
There's multiple ways of cracking passwords. And after cracking all these IP cameras, a lot of people have been coming and say, how do I crack IP cameras? Of course, everybody wants to know that, right? In all the time I have been in this business, the most common request that I get is, how do you crack webcams? How do you crack IP cameras? And
hack Facebook for me.
Yeah, exactly. And it's almost always the husband or the boyfriend or the wife. They want to get into the other camera. So and I basically ignore those requests. But here we have a legitimate use of IP camera hacking. And so I designed a class that we're going to offer in December. And the reason it's in December is because I'm hoping the war is over. Okay, I don't want to offer this class now because it can be used for malicious purposes during the stream, and it might actually compromise what we've already done. I don't want somebody else coming in and changing passwords on the system that we already have. So schedule it for December, so put that on your calendar. If you want to learn how to hack
Slow.
even if the war is not over by then, I think the usefulness of the cameras will be past. Right now is when it's really important that we be able to access streets, offices of Ukraine in this next phase here as the Russians try to push eastward. But in any case, so there's unprotected cameras, there's default passwords, there's you can use things like Burp Suite to be able to essentially run a password cracker through these systems. What we found is that all these cameras are manufactured outside of Eastern Europe. They all use a Latin alphabet.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was one of the first things we had to address is that, okay, if these are all the passwords are in Cyrillic alphabet, how do we do that? We'd have to convert all of our tools into Cyrillic alphabet, but they're made in China,
The beacon is very
the
close.
US, and in the West, and so they all use a Latin alphabet. So that made it easier. Nearly all the cases, what we could do is use the default username and just then cycle through passwords. Because even though if people changed the default account, they left the default username in place. And so that's pretty easy to go through, a password list of 10,000 or 100,000 passwords.
And you're doing that online, so you're constantly trying to break into the camera, is that right?
Exactly. Many of the manufacturers have ways that you can change your password remotely. It's going to vary by camera manufacturer, but you can change your password remotely. Right? So, all right, this makes it easy for us. But you have to have some basic understanding of the camera, and each manufacturer is slightly different. We've got a lot of them by simply going through the manufacturer's detail how to change the password remotely. And so we were able to get a lot of them that way. It's a combination of multiple techniques.
So basically, firstly, find the cameras that have no passwords on. Shodan is a way to do that. And then try the default passwords. So a lot of people leave on this default password, or leave create new users that can get to the beacon. And then you can track the
Right.
I saw on your website you've got like dictionaries of passwords. So did you try those, or did you have to do like
No, brute force is really time consuming for remote hacking. If you're trying to brute force a hack that you have on your system, you can run through millions of passwords in short order. But when you're talking about remote, you actually have to send the username and password, each one, wait for a response. So it's much slower than offline password cracking. So what we did is that we used common passwords with common usernames, and we're able to get a lot of them that way. Of all the cameras that we got, we had a few that were basically not protected, a lot of them that had default credentials. We had a number of them that had multiple usernames and passwords, but they left the default credentials in. We were able to crack some of them, and we were able to also use the manufacturer's remote password change techniques, and that's going to